Hi, and welcome to the Wise Fish Chess Academy. Today we have another fantastic episode in the Superbelt Classic Romania Round 1 GCT 2025 cycle. And we have a game that is between Grandmaster Firouzja Alireza versus Grandmaster Vachel Agrez Maxime. And Alireza with the white pieces. And it was a beautiful game that was played in the um, Sicilian French variation. So we'll just dive right into the game. It was a very, very nice and illustrative game of fighting chess. So Firouzja went e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d3, and this is more of a silent position, which gives you that structure, which looks like the French defense. So this game, I liked it in particular because it's really a closed game for much of the game of the game, and you'll see that we many players, especially the lower rated players, struggle with that kind of games. So this one has some instructive ideas, and you will see why some I'll keep on explaining as we go in the video. So d5, striking in the center, queen e2, very thematic move, a knight f6, g3, and then this is where the theoretical things come in. And g3 is a very beautiful and interesting line. It looks subtle. It goes with the idea of bishop g2, which is just the, bishop g2, lines of h4. And really, if black castles on the king side, which is expected to do, then you'll have a lot of ferocious attack on that side. But really depends on what white will choose to play. So g3 was played, knight c6, bishop g2 as expected, bishop e7, a4, taking up space, basically preventing the expansion of b5. Maybe black should have played this before, but now he cannot do that unless he goes with ideas of a6, b5, which still he cannot achieve because of the um, rook being pinned by the rook on a1. So let's proceed with the game. So we have b6 was played, preparing bishop b7, castles, bishop b7, bishop a4. And of course, bishop a4 is a typical move. That's the best square for that bishop. The square bishop g5 is actually better for the knight, in my thinking at this point of the game. So the bishop on f4 is a good move. H6, just preventing the knight or bishop from going to g5. However, also with sneaky ideas of g5 and having a rapid attack on the king side, which actually happened in the game. Very interesting. And I think it happened, though, I think at the wrong time. So h4 was played, just preventing that from happening. Of course, if you do that now, you're going to lose a pawn. Now, black has quite some good control of the center. You can actually even challenge for the center later on with the bishop d6. Right now, not possible, but you can do that later on. So what does black do in this position? Castles, as expected, d5. Just taking more space and we're pushing black's pieces a little backward. Let's see what happens here. Knight h7. Now this looks a bit quirky for a move. It looks weird. It looks a bit like black is entangling himself, but it's actually not so bad. Rook can go to e8, knight can go to f8, and maybe reroute itself to g6, and so on, putting pressure on the center pawn on e5. So it's not so bad, but it's a bit weird. Computer doesn't like the position of black, but white is just on this slightly better. So c3 was played, just preventing any ideas of d5, d4, or knight d4, or knight b5, b4, and all those, just to limit the structure. White's knight can also be routed to, can be routed to a3, c2 with ideas of d4, or even rerouting itself to e3, and keeping on going towards the king side, and you never know what's going to happen on h6, f6. So it's a slow but interesting setup. Black really doesn't have so much to do, and you see in the game the black actually tried to fight from the king side, and I guess that's the approach that you have to do in this position. You just wait, and you're just going to be ripped apart. So queen d7, rook e1, e8, right? It's just as we're seeing now, that is the critical point. F5. and f5 creates a weakness on e6. But well, black doesn't have so much of a choice but to allow this to happen. There's still a lot of time by both players. GM Firouzja is ahead by about 17 minutes of the clock. And f5 is an interesting one. So naturally, you don't want to allow black to expand with g5 following from there. So you capture it, creating the weakness on e6. Black has to capture with the bishop, and of course, black's threat is very simple: try to break in the center, and that is why a move like bishop h3 comes in exclamation mark, because it creates a lot of pressure on this pawn and pinning the queen at the same time. So it will be quite difficult for black to really hold this position. Maybe he has moves like knight to e to d8, or maybe bishop to c8. But again, all those are really awkward moves. Let's see what he had to play at that moment. He actually ignored. Um, but I think this move is not a good move. I'll put a double exclamation mark on it. Computer doesn't like it either so much. I think it opens up the position quite a bit. The position is still equal, but just improved for white after this move. I think it's over Komito, and you will see that in the position that pawn on g5, which later moved to g4, became a weakness, and really Grandmaster Firouzja from France really suffered. Remember, this is a clash of the French. So it's very interesting to see how French number 1 versus French number 2 and how it turned out. So captures. Bishop blocks the pawn, undermining the pawn on e6. So that means that pawn will stay a weakness forever. Queen moves to e7. Queen captures, rook captures, of course, because if he hadn't done that, the bishop could, or maybe not, could capture the pawn on e6 and check. Knight goes back, and of course we can see white has rerouted as though he has fianchettoed his pieces again, and so there's a bit of a problem here now. The pawn on g5 is quite weak. The knight on h7 is misplaced. The bishop on b7 seems to be in its own game. So there's a big problem here. Let's see what happens. Knight f6. So black tries to reroute their pieces. Knight comes to exchange. And of course, if you take the exchange, the queen goes into a centralized position on g4, and the position just keeps getting going downstream. You will see that the knight is on d2 will also be heading to f3 and putting much more pressure on this pawn. Bishop will go back to h3, and really there a rook battery will happen on the e5, and I mean that's just be game over in a short time. So white captured it, inevitably had to capture it anyway, and though brought the other knight, to try to hold the position. And as you can see, by the time you have to bring your knight in and just go back where it came from, it can show you that the position is really, really very, very difficult. There's an interesting idea here: knight bishop times d5, but of course it doesn't work. If you see a very dangerous tactic, knight to e to d4, attacking the queen and taking it, or actually taking it with the with the bishop, sorry. So it's a bit risky to play that move, and there'll be a mate threat following there, because the bishop in this diagonal, once that happens, will be coordinating with the rook from region h1, so you cannot take that pawn. So knight f1, rerouting again, another committal move, pawn to g4, and again, how do you deal with this weakness? So a5, interesting move. Now, you could argue, of course, taking it with the pawn just breaks the pawn structure. Taking it with the knight is very interesting. In fact, when you take it with the knight, you should be able to see that black will do all kinds of things. Now he can play moves like knight e3, and there's no way to defend this pawn. He can also play knight to f5, forking the rook and knight. And then this rook is also, I mean, it's basically pinned. And this knight for f5 can even still go to e to d6 and fork the bishop, and the rook, creating a lot of chaos in the position. So it's almost impossible to actually capture this pawn. And in the game, of course, Super Grandmasters, that pawn was not captured. So b5 was played, dividing the labor forces. A6 is a move that you always play. I missed a move like this in the Olympiad of Chennai 2022, and I ended up losing the game. Here I had a very, very nice advantage. I just needed to play that, but I did not play it. I allowed my opponent to actually play it themselves. So this is instructive. Bishop goes to A8, which is the first move. Otherwise, you'll get into ideas like C5, where you get a lot of problems in that center. Still, the move bishop times d5 is not possible for the same idea that I explained earlier on before. So we go rook comes to d1, rook gets out of the pin. Now this is just routine, creating a lot of pressure on the weak points. Rook defends, queen moves up, knight attacks the pawn. Not bothered about it. Now this bishop is cut off. It's almost like a pawn on A8. So it doesn't even matter whether the knight captures the pawn on A. You can always bring rook and and create a lot of pressure here, entry points for your rooks. So this is what happens. E4 was played, rook A1 defended it, then rook caught it. Now here it's just pretty maneuver and maneuver and maneuver until you get something, but the technique here is sublime, as you are going to see. So knight attacks the rook, rook gets in, knight attacks the rook, rook gets in, more pressure on the pawn, g4, bishop goes in to defend the pawn, rook comes back, bishop attacks the pawn. I'm not bothered about it, routes the knight, reroutes the rook for an exchange, just to keep the knight out of play. Of course, we capture with the pawn, and your knight is forced to move backwards, and the queen will penetrate the position, and you'll really be in a very, very horrible position. Also to note is that knight, if you exchange the rooks at this moment, then when knight goes to e3, then there's no way to actually defend this pawn. You'll be in big, big trouble. Both the knight and rook will be attacking the pawn. So he did not take it, of course. Knight came back, and now the white king desperately tries to move away. Queen gets back to put pressure on the pawn, and now it's time for the break. Bishop captures, and actually missed a very beautiful move. In play queen a2 immediately, and rip the position apart. The style, even what he played was not bad at all. Pawn takes, then queen moves there, then knight check. Brilliant way to deal with the whole setup. If you take your time to look at this move, it's just brilliant and fantastic. And there was actually no way, like you will see, it was just a pure tactical blow and a fantastic finish by French #1 GM Firouzja Al-Reza. So the pawn was captured, queen takes, bishop takes. This is all desperate. Take, 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 and a beautiful game played by Firouzja Firouzja. Grandmaster Maxime, #2. Virtual Grave resigned at this point in light that he's going to either lose the queen or get checkmated, or both. It's going to happen at the same time. So thank you for following the channel and for enjoying the video. Do not forget to share, like, and subscribe. Bye bye.